Also, Ambassador Henry Mayega from NRM. Of course, he's totally NRM. Like I told you, whenever he comes on the show, he has to adorn something in yellow.
There's always something, yes.
There's always something in yellow somewhere, definitely. Right. Now, this morning on Kickstarter, we're having a conversation about the electoral fever. One would call it electoral fever, one would call it the road map to 2021. Yes, we're in 2019, but for a few parties, they're already in 2021 and looking how to make sure that those 2021 elections to record a victory for them. Now, in regards to that electoral fever that is spreading like wildfire, it just comes a few days after what happened in regards to the DP party bloc that was formed. Now, the Democratic Party, together with the People's Democratic Party and the Social Democratic Party, brought together the focus on bringing new governance that will cause change within Uganda. Now, in regards to that, a few days later, as of yesterday, the NRM released their political roadmap 2021, and I have a booklet with me here in regards to it. So everyone is preparing, everyone is ready. And are you, as a citizen, ready? Or should we fill you in on what's happening? Well, we'll be sharing with you a story in regards to that bloc that was formed. But let's start it off with the fact that the NRM did yesterday reveal to us that one thing is for sure: we are demanding more districts. And not just that, they're also making sure in regards to their political roadmap, March from January 2019 to March 2019, they're going to just be looking, if I'm not wrong, they're going to be looking at what has been happening in the previous years, carrying out research, seeing how they're going to change a few things in regards to 2021. So that's why we have the Honorable Ambassador here with us this morning. So let's start this conversation off with: is the NRM simply preparing, or did this block in one way or another shake a few things?
No, I think I want to agree with you that, of course, the elections are just right at the corner, and whoever is worth their political salt and name, in terms of political parties, have to really do the things that are probably in their wisdom that will make them win the elections in 2021. So when the NRM comes out and it gives the roadmap and is talking about demarcation of constituencies, because, as you know, there are new districts and new, of course, political jurisdictions. I think that points to the fact that the NRM is preparing, just as the DP is, when they come together with SDP and PDP. It's the election mode, election, I don't know, roadmap and all these kinds of things. And so everybody seems to be preparing, in my view, which is okay, because in democracy, it's imperative that people begin to think about how they can stage themselves and how they can win those elections and put things together in order to raise the numbers which are necessary, because we're going for elections. There was a time in this country when people were not thinking about elections. They instead thought about taking over government using the arms. Now, this administration of President Yoweri Museveni has enabled this country to always think in terms of having these elections after very 5 years. For me, that is a plus to our democracy.
Let me ask you this question. Of course, you saw the DP, PDP and SDP join hands and join forces so that they can, like you're saying, prepare for 2021. So the question out here has been, could be NRM is now acting as a result of a knee-jerk reaction, because now the opposition, so to speak, is preparing, then we need to make sure that we harm our clout early enough before we lose it to them. Is this a knee-jerk reaction based on what happened last week?
Well, I wouldn't want to assume that this is a knee-jerk reaction to what is happening in the rest of the opposition, over which, of course, as you know, Kizza Besigye has kept a stranglehold on the opposition, not allowing others to sponsor candidates, especially for the presidential elections, for president for that matter. And so that stranglehold seems to be broken at the moment, because when you see the DP coming together with the rest of the other small parties to put up a spirited fight in the general elections that we are going to have in 2021, it indicates to me, and those who are very good observers of the political situation in the country, that the stranglehold hitherto imposed by Kizza Besigye in the opposition is broken. It's gone, because it's not going only to be the only bull in the corral. That is number one. Number two, the NRM is, I think I should make this one very clear. The NRM is not looking for coalitions. because it has the strengths already. What needs to be done is to put things together and work out a roadmap, make sure that, just like the Secretary General was actually expounding on the matter yesterday. Now, when you look at the DP trying to take over the other small parties and so on, that, in my view, is an indication that some people, I mean, that party probably is beginning to see that they don't have enough numbers. So how do you get the numbers? You can only get the numbers by looking or actually consuming the rest of the small parties. And in this case, it is SDP and the PDP, which I don't know whether they will be in a position to consume the FDC, to swallow the FDC, or to bring it on board in as far as sponsoring their candidates, whether for president and members of parliament and LCs and so on and so forth. So that, in my view, gives a distinction that the NRM has strength, but that strength must be maintained. How do you maintain it? You must come out with a roadmap, which the party has come out with, and the DP, because they don't measure up in terms of strength, political strength, on the political scene, they must look for support from the rest of the parties. Otherwise, if they did have that strength, then they wouldn't look for smaller parties.
So what you're saying is that they don't scare you at all?
No, there is no scare. Absolutely not.
Well, in regards to the fact that the NRM is not scared in regards to what the ambassador is saying, there's one thing for sure. Maybe in regards to the DP bloc coming up, talking about how they're going to actually strengthen their numbers. We have the NRM talking about how they're going to be trying to actually strengthen in regards to constituencies. A number of people wondering, do we still need any more of this? What is going to be the financial implication? How is this all going to work out? Since we have you, Ambassador, how does this play for, because this is all a part of your roadmap. One thing that has come out and has been highlighted is having new constituencies created ahead of the elections.
Two things. One of them is that, of course, it is still at proposal stage. I don't want to take it that actually it is already a decision. Of course, people will argue that the NRM has got the numbers in Parliament, and of course the President is NRM, and therefore they can have a sway in as far as a decision on that matter of more districts, more constituencies, and so on and so forth. So at that level, it is still a proposal, in my view. And therefore, there are people who want districts. I'm not going to give you my personal view on that one. But the second one is the legal position of these things. What does the law say? Because the law, normally when it comes to establishing either constituencies and districts, there is a way how those things are supposed to be done. And as far as the constituencies, demarcation of constituencies is concerned, I think they work on numbers. How many people, how many voters are there? And then that really makes it possible for those who are supposed to take the decision to actually make it. Because, I mean, if they say, for instance, that a constituency is supposed to be 60,000 voters plus, and already that place has got that 60,000, irrespective of the fact that there could be probably issues with money and financing all these things and having a big parliament and having huge administrative expenses and so on and so forth, the law gives us the way how we go about these things in terms of numbers of voters and all these kinds of things, or the size of the population. That's the little idea which I have in as far as the demarcation of constituencies are concerned. But of course, I want to take cognizance of the fact that there are concerns that more districts and more constituencies mean more public administration expenditure.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Which we're definitely going to be taking a look at. Now, we do have the NRM side of things, but let's actually take a look and listen to what the DP, in regards to the DP bloc that was formed, the Democratic Party being a part of it, the People's Democratic Party being a part of it, and also the Social Democratic Party being a part of it. Take a watch.
Anybody in the opposition or any Ugandan who is against uniting all forces of the opposition to fight Museveni is the biggest enemy of our opposition. How do you fight people who are uniting for a cause? And secondly, we have always been uniting when it is too late. But now we have 2 years ahead. We can wipe out all our misunderstandings, all our problems, as we look at our unity. We are seeing it as another way that would make us reach 2021 when we have wiped up all our differences.
It doesn't matter what name you call it. By whatever name called, you just look at the theme and the spirit behind. The spirit is working together to remove the dictatorship. To me, it is a welcome idea. It's long overdue. Now that it has come, I welcome it. I'll give it my support. I'll give it all my energies and my brain to make it work. Whether it has failed in the past, yes. Will that stop us from trying again? No. So we shall proceed with it. And it will not stop with these individual two parties. I think it must go beyond this, and we look at all our colleagues, our comrades that have either left us or are called in the operations with us. We must reach out to every one of them.
So there you have it. The members of parliament on that end believe in regards to the DP bloc, they're starting early. They don't want to start too late, Ambassador. Does that show that maybe in regards to 2021, there could be a stronger opposition that's going to be coming around?
Well, a strong opposition or no strong opposition, I think it is their democratic right to come together. There is no doubt about that. And that has been, as far as I'm concerned, enabled by a situation which has been created in this country by the NRM administration to allow parties to come together, to allow those who think that they can work across party lines in order to swell their numbers. For me, that is a plus to our democracy. There was a time, as I said before, when it wasn't possible that parties come together. Of course, we have had these experiences before. You can talk about 1962, when the UPC and KY came together. You can talk about 1979, when the NLF government took over in this country, and DP, UPC, CP. By that time, there was UPM, which eventually, and it was led by President NRM. They came together and formed the UNLF government in 1980. And then you can go on, the story goes on. 1985, the Okello junta, which put together the DPs and UPCs, and then they formed a government, and they lasted for only 1 year. And then in 2001, Kizza Besigye came together. There was also an earlier one in 1996, which Paulo Samogere led, and it was composed of CP, some elements of UPC, and then the DP. And so these coalitions have been going on and on. But my observation about these coalitions is that they actually not only create an instability in their respective political parties, those which have come together, but they also have an impact, which in my view has always been negative. And I hope that those people who are actually going for these coalitions at the moment have studied the situations that we have had before.
What's
of these coalitions.
Impacts of this?
The impact, the negative impact has always been political actual instability. And I will give an example, 1962, because the UPC and KY came together, but eventually what happened is that they disagreed, and eventually we had a coup in 1971 as a result of the disagreement between the KY and the UPC, between Saidwa Mtesa and Milton Obote, and Saidwa Mtesa of course got exiled, and the rest is just history. I can give another example of the coalition of 1980 of the UNLF, which brought the DPs together with the UPC, with the CP, with the UPM, and so on and so forth. They came together for purposes of removing Idi Amin from power, which was okay, because I mean that was the most diabolic dictatorship that we have ever had in this country. So they came together and removed Idi Amin. It was through a war. It wasn't even a takeover. It was through a war, and eventually what happened is that Idi Amin was removed, and eventually the fallout between the forces that had constituted the UNLF really brought a lot of confusion to the country. And so that is the instability bit of it. But otherwise, people coming together, or political parties coming together, I think that's okay. Because in terms of democracy, yes, it's permissible.
Okay, because last week we had Honorable Michael Mabike together with you right here, and he said that this time round, opposition parties have learned their lessons, and so this time round they know what directions to take and which ones not to take, of course based on the lessons learned over the years. Now the question would be, of course we had the elections just a few years back, and people would be asking, the NRM is the leading party, and it should lead by example and not follow the cloud, so to speak, because people are saying that now the NRM has come out to tell us its roadmap based on what happened last week, the union of the opposition parties, of course this particular three. But now someone would ask, it's just been practically 2017, 2018, and now we're in 2019, and the members of parliament, of course them that are in NRM, instead of focusing on bringing out their services strongly to the people who put them in this particular seats, they're now focusing on the elections 2021. Why should it be this soon? Do we have our priorities misplaced?
Well, it appears election board seems to be immediately, it perplexes almost everyone in this country, that even immediately after elections, the election mode begins. Because after 2016, people were as if we were actually gearing towards elections as if it was just 1 year ahead.
Is it because
and
people want
that
change?
kind of thing?
Is it because?
But I wouldn't be surprised about that one, because that seems to be the nature of democracy and all these kinds of things. That there is always that yearning to have more and more and more of political space by any political party, by all sorts of individuals, and so on and so forth. So that one doesn't surprise me. For me, what matters most is for us to have a legal framework in the country to control those political emotions as people express themselves democratically. So that fever, in my view, costs us up to a point. I don't want to probably give a percentage, but it costs us, because rather than concentrating on development work, kind of the situation sucks the energy and the time out of us, because we have to electioneer all the time. Yeah. So there is a problem with that one. But fortunately, I believe that we have a legal framework in existence that can address that problem of ensuring that even if people are actually in election mode all the time, even after, immediately after elections, there is that level of understanding, and of course imposed on us by the legal framework we have in the country, that even if people are thinking about elections, there is other work to be done.
Okay, now in regards to political parties thinking of the elections, there are also the citizens thinking of the elections as well. Now in regards to what the Citizens Coalition for Electoral Democracy Ambassador said, they wrote an open letter to the President highlighting 3 challenges, which you're going to take a listen to in regards to as well. But there was one challenge being the monetization of elections and corruption in the election process, violence during elections, and integrity of the National Voters Registry. And as we see it right now, we do have that as a part of the NRM roadmap to 2021. One thing that they're talking about is having their voters go ahead and actually register. Yes. So where does the NRM put all of this in regards to their roadmap 2021?
No, the matter of the role of money in elections is a very, very serious matter. But I want to believe, and I think I know it exceedingly well, that's not a problem only of Uganda, but even, for instance, when you give an example of the United States, they've been trying as much as possible to make sure that they put limits, they put a tab on how much somebody can use in elections. And up to now, and this is a democracy which has existed for over 250 years,
right.
But still they are still grappling with the idea of how they should put a lid on how much somebody can raise in order to get involved in elections. So you can see it's not only a problem of Uganda, but rather a problem of all democracies in the world, including those which are older than the Ugandan democracy. So money is an issue, because if I must go and contest in a constituency, I must raise probably something like $500 million shillings. And who has that money unless we turn into thieves? Because nobody can earn a salary that can raise that kind of money. Nobody can raise money from friends to that level. Nobody. So it becomes extremely difficult. I want to imagine that probably as we continue along the democratic path, at some point in time, we are going to realize as a country that it's necessary for us to put some kind of a limit to how much a candidate for a constituency, a candidate for the presidency, raises in terms of cash in order to fund those elections.
All right.
The violence is a concern of everyone, and the rest of the problems that we normally have in elections. Yeah.
Okay, so let's take a watch on this and see what you have to say as a citizen. Remember, you can use the hashtag morning at NTV, and also you could be able to call us when we return.
The President to support the campaign finance bill 2018 that is actually already in the House, which actually regulates the amount of money that political candidates spend during elections.
So let's have a conversation about the Campaign Finance Bill 2018, because the ambassador has also mentioned the fact that we definitely need to have a cap to how much a member of parliament, maybe for one who would like to contest for a member of parliament seat, for one who would also want to go for presidency, the amount of money used in these elections. Ambassador.
Yeah, as I said earlier, this is a concern in many democracies. I was one time following what was happening in the parliament in the UK. Again, they were talking about these problems. How does somebody raise money in order to do a clean campaign? How much do you raise? How do you raise it without you really getting involved in corruption, because many times people are tempted that how do I raise money? Many people in this country, for instance, have sold their houses in order to raise campaign finance. And this is a situation, I think, which should dictate to us to make sure that we come out with some kind of a law that can put a bar, and so that campaign finance does not make people really go off the rails. Now, I wanted to give another example from South Africa, because many times I talk about the US and give examples from there, and people don't want to listen to that, and they want to listen to a country which is almost at the same level of democracy. Let's talk about South Africa. In South Africa, what they do, and I believe that probably we can borrow examples, whether they are applicable to Uganda, to the Ugandan situation or not, that is a matter for another day. But in South Africa, they elect parties. And then after electing the party, it is the party which decides who goes where, depending, of course, on how much vote they've got. And they say, for instance, for you, you'll go to and represent Kampala Central. You belong to the NRM. The NRM has got a majority. If you are NRM, both of you and myself, they distribute, in other words, the constituencies according to how much of the proportion of the vote a political party has got. The ANC, for instance, has been winning the elections ever since democracy came to that country. And the ANC, as a political party, now decides who represents which constituency after the party has been voted. So they don't vote for individuals, but they vote for the party. So maybe we can borrow examples from that. I know that coming out with the law, in as far as finance is concerned, will be a very difficult thing, because how do you get to know how much I've raised? How do you know, for instance, that I've got so much from friends and all this kind of, so it becomes difficult. But we can look at elements within the South African situation, we can look at elements within the American situation, we can look at elements within the British system, and then we put together a law that can guide us in as far as campaign finance is concerned.
When you talk about campaign financing, especially in African states, and let's not just go far, let's stick it here. Like you said, you have to have roughly, is it quarter or $500 million for you to be able to do, you know, weighty campaigns, so you can maybe gain clout, so to speak. So why do we need this money? For example, campaign financing. What is this money used for? Maybe you can just help us break it down, because many people have been saying these candidates look for all this money just to put it in voter bribery. Absolutely. So where does this money go to? And
in my submission earlier, I think I hinted on the fact that sometimes people are tempted to become corrupt in order to raise money for the campaign. And where does the money go? Very good question. Because if people must come to your rally, depending on where you are, if you are an urban contestant for MP, that even takes the stakes higher. If you are in these up-country constituencies, maybe it's a little cheaper, but eventually everybody is spending. And at the end of the day, it has an impact on the economy. Lots of money in circulation, and that has inflationary pressures on the economy and all these kinds of things. So it's a very big concern. But where does the money go? Good question, because I have seen, and I've been involved in the campaigns, and I have seen that you have to transport your supporters. I mean, in a constituency, for instance, of about 60,000 voters, and you are going to do probably something like 20 rallies, and people these days don't want to walk to these rally points, and so you must transport them.
So what you're telling us
many
is
times you have to give them drinks.
The numbers we see on the media actually transported from where they are to, the rally ground.
This is a reality. This is a reality, because I'm not coming from Mars. I'm a citizen of this country, and I've seen these things happen.
Right.
And so you must give them drinks. Sometimes the top executives in the various sub-counties or counties and so on, or district level, you have to give meals. There's lots of spending money. There are many cases, for instance, you've had in the court after elections, where people have been accused before the courts of law that they actually gave a bribe of money. They gave bribe in terms of money. And these are the things, because you asked the question, where does this money go? I'm just giving you those three examples as to how people spend these monies during the campaigns. And it's simply a very difficult situation for whoever wants to contest. Very difficult. I've told you that, for instance, people have sold their houses in order to raise campaign money. People have really been borrowing from banks and all these kinds of things. That is not typical. I was given an example last week of somebody who contested in a constituency, and I'm not going to name names, and he used 1 billion shillings in order to defeat another very strong candidate. No, I was told that just last week.
So money
and
comes
that becomes
into
really
place.
terrible.
So money comes into place somewhere, Ambassador, and we must agree and say, yes, it actually is no longer a secret. It's there, it is necessary, and it is used for a few things. But if every political party is getting ready for 2021, why are we not having the campaign finance bill also being prepared? Because we need it before the end of perhaps even 2019, which maybe shouldn't have already been done maybe as of last year, because I mean, if we're preparing for elections, we really also need to put a cap to this in regards to money.
Let's also understand our framework in which we operate, and as far as enactment of laws is concerned, because there has to be a permit given by the Minister of Finance as to how much this is going to cost in order to come out with a new law. There is always that one, because sometimes we are actually held back in terms of enacting laws, because Minister of Finance can say that in as far as enacting this law or putting this bill into law, so much is needed, and that becomes sometimes a debilitating factor, and therefore the laws will not come as quickly. And besides that one, of course, you know, there are so many laws in pipeline, and each one of them costing money.
Right.
Because for any law that goes through Parliament, it has to be cleared by the Minister of Finance in terms of determining the financial implications of that law. So let's not gloss over that one, because it's a very important point. At many times, of course, it becomes difficult for some of these laws. Campaign finance law, I want to agree 100% that it should have come yesterday, because of the things that we've talked about before. How it becomes extremely difficult for somebody to participate in an election, and yet you don't have money. But sometimes even people actually are very good candidates, but because they don't have money, so they can't contest for these elections, because they don't have the money. And should they attempt to raise the money, then they have to be tempted probably to become corrupt in order to raise the money. So the situation is dicey, and therefore it calls for a lot of scratching of our heads and then coming together without invoking the party lines and all these kinds of things. This is something that concerns everybody.
Let me ask you this question. Of course, like you said, the conversation this year, especially for the president, is how to fight corruption. And like you said, you even give an example. Someone once sold his house so he can have meaningful campaigns. And we were told, and we were having this conversation, that by the time you invest all this money in a campaign, once you are elected, your main focus will be to recoup your money back. So how will we fight corruption if these particular laws are not expedited, so to speak, beg your pardon?
Well, that too has quite a number of facets, because the first thing, for instance, you and I, the two of you agree, and of course our listeners and the viewers, that the first thing normally which unites the opposition and the ruling NRM once Parliament sits for the very first time after elections is determining the emoluments. And at that particular point in time, everybody is told, including journalists, you people who are journalists, to get out, and then they determine that. But I don't want to blame them, because it is because of the situation that we have on the ground. People have used lots of money, and so somehow there must be, if it was loss of blood, then it would be blood transfusion or retransfusion, you know, because you have used a lot of money, and therefore you must determine how much you must get as quickly as possible. And I don't want to blame them, because it is the situation that we have in the country that really makes them take those kinds of steps. And therefore, the law should, yes, I agree 100%, it should come quickly, but don't forget about the financial implications of it. I don't know. But of course, I'm happy that we're beginning to talk about it, and I believe that eventually we're going to end in a situation where campaign finance is regulated.
Okay, 21st of August will be a very key day for every single person, especially Ugandans here, because then that's the date where the preparation and presentation of the NRM presidential candidate to the National Electoral Commission will happen. You are from that side, of course. Who will you be presenting as the presidential candidate this time around? I'm sure these talks are already there within the party. Would you tell us something about that?
So, well, I will give a personal view, because I can't determine what the others are going to say as far as who should be their presidential candidate. My constituency, as I say, because I don't come from a geographical constituency, I don't represent Nakawa, I don't represent any of these constituencies that we have in the country, but my constituency is called President Yoweri Museveni. That is I don't beat about the bush, and as far as that is concerned, But of course, people are free. There should be discussion, and me, I'm happy because there were times when these kinds of things were not happening. If you look at, for instance, because the problem sometimes when we come to these talk shows is that some people don't want to be reminded about the history, where we've come from, but we'll continuously remind the people of Uganda where we've come from, because in the 1970s, from 1971 up to 1979, we did not have elections because we had a dictatorship in place. And so the country was being ruled by decrees. But now we're talking about laws, enacting laws. And they go through, there was no parliament, for instance, in the 1970s. And so decrees, Idi Amin was giving decrees from time to time on how to proceed. But of course, decrees sometimes are good. And there's a provision in the current legal framework we have in the country, in the constitution. The president has executive powers. He can issue an executive order, which becomes law. But the president has been very, very reserved in as far as using that fruit is concerned. And many of these things, as you can see, are going through parliament. Yeah. So this president is my constituency, and therefore, and he's doing a good job. I don't have any doubts in my mind that he's not doing a good job. He's doing a good job, and I believe that we can continue with him.
On a scale of
other
1 to 10,
people can have their own thoughts about that.
On a scale of 1 to 10, where would you put him?
No, this gentleman is doing probably, because first of all, let's compare him with the rest of those who have performed, and as far as president is concerned. Because you remember we had Said Mtesa. He didn't have a lot of time because after about 4 years he was kicked out, because he became executive president, not executive president, ceremonial president. In any case, he didn't have executive powers, but he stayed for only 4 years. From 62 to 66, he was kicked out. But there was a prime minister who was Milton Obote. People used to talk about the many hospitals that he built and the schools and so on and so forth. Fine, that's okay. But the longevity, because you can talk about Idi Amin, you can talk about Rutwa, Okero Rutwa, you can talk about Benaisa. By the way, Ugandans, I always remind them that in the space of only 1 year, from 1979 up to 1980, we had to change heads of state in this country 5 times in just 1 year. From Idi Amin to Yusuf Rule to Benaisa to Paul Mwanga to Milton Obote in the space of just 1 year. And with a lot of instability, and with lots of killings, lots of looting, and all these kinds of things. That history, many people don't want to hear it. But right now, the longevity of President Yoweri Museveni has given us a level of stability, unprecedented level of stability in the country.
1 to 10?
80%.
We're not even going by 1 to 10, we're going by 100. Now, as it stands, Ambassador has raised one thing: instability, political instability. One of the things that was actually still raised by the Citizens Coalition for Electoral Democracy did mention violence during elections. And as it stands as of now, with a roadmap released for 2021, violence has been a part of things. Even as of last year, we have seen it. Where is the security, the safety for a citizen, someone who maybe would like to vote in 2021? But with all that is happening, where does the security lie for you as a citizen? Ambassador.
Violence, first of all, should be condemned by everybody. You don't have to be NRM or DP or civil society. It should be condemned by everybody, whether it is within election time or not. Violence is condemned. It's condemnable. Nobody should really clap because violence is taking place. And that brings, of course, a responsibility on the government to make sure that we have an election-free violence. But many times, because I've been involved, for instance, I got involved in the campaigns for President Yoweri Museveni in 2010, 2011, and so we traversed the country. But what I also saw is that in the majority of cases, the violence is encouraged by those who are taking part in the elections. And that level of, you were here, I was in Beijing, when it happened in Arua, when the presidential convoy was stoned. I mean, that couldn't have happened during a minute's time, that a presidential convoy is actually stoned by anybody from the opposition.
Of course, that's a controversial
I'm just giving
story,
an example.
Right?
It's controversial, but I mean, they showed pictures of the vehicle which was broken and all these kinds of things. Some people may doubt it, fine, that's okay. But violence is a very big problem, irrespective of whether it is being meted out on people in the opposition or against the NRM, is just equally bad, and we should discourage it as much as possible. Because we can still go into elections and we do an election-free, violence-free election. We can have that. And that is the best thing that this country can give to this country as people who are involved in politics.
All right, so as we come to a close, what should we be expecting in the coming days, of course, from NRM? 1 minute.
Well, they've given the roadmap, and you want to imagine that President Yoweri Museveni is going to remain the presidential candidate for the NRM. I don't think that is going to change much because he's doing a good job.
Okay, thank you so much, Ambassador Henry Mayega, for coming on the show and for your honest views.
Thank you very much.
He says that he is in support of the ruling president, of course, His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. What are your views? The hashtag is Morning at NTV across all the social media platforms. Morning at NTV still continues. Up next is David Rukasi with reality on the ground. Don't go too far.
You're watching Morning at NTV.
My name is Miro Enoch from Chisasi. I just won 1 million shillings from Airtel Uganda. I'm so grateful to Airtel for making me millionaire this